A black CEO was humiliated by his former interviewer, but when they met again years later, Marcus Wells straightened his tie for the umpteenth time as he sat in the pristine waiting room, Pinnacle Industries. The leather chair seemed to creak every nervous shift of his body, and he couldn't help but feel out of place amidst the sleek, modern decor. At 45 years old, Marcus had spent the last 2 decades climbing the corporate ladder, and this interview for the position of Chief Operating Officer at Pinnacle was meant to be the crowning achievement of his career. Glanced at his watch, a simple yet elegant timepiece gifted to him by his late father. The memory of his dad's words echoed in his mind. "Son, no matter what life throws at you, always hold your head high and let your work speak for itself." Marcus took a deep breath, drawing strength from those words as he had done countless times before. "Mr. Wells?" Crisp voice cut through his reverie. He looked up to see a young woman with a polite smile. "Mr. Hawthorne will see you now." Marcus rose, smoothing down his impeccably tailored suit, an investment he hoped would pay off today. He followed the assistant down a long hallway lined with awards and accolades, each one a testament to Pinnacle Industries' success in the tech world. At the end of the corridor stood an imposing oak door with a nameplate that read, "Richard Hawthorne, CEO." The assistant knocked twice before opening the door. "Mr. Hawthorne, Marcus Wells is here for his interview." Marcus stepped into the spacious office, immediately struck by the panoramic view of the city skyline. Behind an enormous desk sat Richard Hawthorne, a man whose reputation preceded him. Known for his shrewd business acumen and no-nonsense attitude, Hawthorne had turned Pinnacle into a global powerhouse over the past decade. "Mr. Wells, please have a seat," Hawthorne said, not bothering to stand or offer a handshake. His tone was neutral, but there was something in his eyes that made Marcus uneasy. As Marcus settled into the chair across from Hawthorne, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The CEO's gaze seemed to linger a moment too long, his expression unreadable. "So, Mr. Wells," Hawthorne began, leaning back in his chair, "your resume is interesting. 20 years in the industry, steadily moving up, but I have to wonder, why hasn't a man of your experience reached this level sooner?" The emphasis on experience wasn't lost on Marcus. He'd faced subtle and not so subtle discrimination before, but he'd hoped that at a company as progressive as Pinnacle, things would be different. "I believe in earning my positions through hard work and proven results, Mr. Hawthorne," Marcus replied evenly. "Each role I've held has prepared me for greater responsibilities. I'm here today because I know I'm ready to help take Pinnacle to even greater heights." Hawthorne's lips curled into what might have been a smirk. "Admirable. But tell me, Mr. Wells, how do you think you'd fit in with our corporate culture here at Pinnacle?" The loaded question hung in the air. Marcus felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach, the same one he'd felt countless times when facing thinly veiled prejudice. But he refused to let it show. "I've always believed that diversity of thought and experience is crucial for innovation," Marcus answered, his voice steady. "My background in both startups and established corporations gives me a unique perspective that I believe would be invaluable to Pinnacle's growth strategy." Hawthorne nodded, but his eyes had already drifted back to Marcus's resume. "I see you attended State University. Not exactly an Ivy League education, is it?" Marcus felt his jaw clench. "State University has an excellent business program, Mr. Hawthorne, but more importantly, I've spent the last 2 decades applying what I learned there in real-world situations. My track record speaks for itself." "Does it?" Hawthorne's tone was dismissive. "Because I have to wonder if your background has played a role in your career trajectory." The implication was clear, and Marcus felt a surge of anger that he quickly suppressed. He'd faced this kind of prejudice before, but never so blatantly in a professional setting. "Mr. Hawthorne," Marcus said, his voice low and controlled, "I'd prefer to focus on my qualifications and what I can bring to Pinnacle Industries. My background, as you put it, has given me a resilience and perspective that I consider assets, not liabilities." Hawthorne leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Let's cut to the chase, Mr. Wells. This is a high-profile position. Our clients, our board members, they have certain expectations. I'm not sure you're the right fit for what we need." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd prepared for tough questions about his experience, his vision for the company, even his management style. But this naked prejudice, left him momentarily speechless. In that moment of silence, Hawthorne seemed to grow even more dismissive. Perhaps you'd be better suited for a position in our community outreach department? We're always looking for diverse candidates there. Marcus felt a surge of emotions: anger, humiliation, disbelief. But above all, a steely determination took hold. He thought of his father, all the barriers he'd overcome to get to this point. He wouldn't let this be the end of his journey. Rising slowly from his chair, Marcus looked Hawthorne directly in the eye. "Mr. Hawthorne, I came here today because I believed Pinnacle Industries valued innovation, forward thinking, and yes, diversity. It's clear I was mistaken. Not about my qualifications, but about the true nature of this company's leadership. Thank you for your time." With that, Marcus turned and walked towards the door, his head held high despite the burning sensation of humiliation creeping up his neck. As he reached for the handle, Hawthorne's voice stopped him. "Mr. Wells," the CEO called out, a note of surprise in his voice. "You're walking away from the opportunity of a lifetime. No one walks out on me." Marcus paused, then turned back to face Hawthorne. "No, Mr. Hawthorne. I'm walking away from a toxic environment that goes against everything I stand for. The opportunity of a lifetime isn't just about a title or a paycheck. It's about being somewhere you can make a real difference. Clearly, that place isn't here." Without waiting for a response, Marcus opened the door and strode out of the office. As he made his way through the hallway and back to the elevator, he could feel the eyes of employees on him. Had they heard? Did they know what had just transpired? In the elevator, as the doors closed and he began his descent, Marcus finally allowed himself a moment to process what had happened. The sting of Hawthorne's words, the blatant discrimination, the crushed hopes of what this job could have meant, it all washed over him. But as the elevator reached the ground floor and the doors opened to the bustling lobby, Marcus straightened his shoulders. This wasn't the end, told himself. It was just another obstacle to overcome. And if there was one thing Marcus Wells knew how to do, it was to rise above adversity. Little did he know, as he stepped out into the bright sunlight of the city, that this humiliating interview was just the beginning of a journey that would change not only his life, but the very fabric, Pinnacle Industries itself. The days following the disastrous interview at Pinnacle Industries were a blur for Marcus Wells. He found himself oscillating between anger, disappointment, and a fierce determination to prove Richard Hawthorne wrong. As he sat in his modest home office, staring at the wall of certificates and awards that chronicled his career, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was at a crossroad. His phone buzzed, displaying a text from his daughter, Amelia. "How did the interview go, Dad? Keeping my fingers crossed for you." Marcus sighed, heart heavy. He hadn't told his family about the humiliating experience yet, partly out of shame and partly because he was still processing it himself. But Amelia, sharp as ever, sensed something was amiss when he didn't immediately share the news. Another buzz. This time it was his wife, Evelyn. "Everything okay, honey? You've been awfully quiet since yesterday." He knew he couldn't keep it from them any longer. With a deep breath, Marcus picked up the phone and dialed Evelyn's number. "Hey, love." Evelyn's warm voice came through. "How are you holding up?" The concern in her tone broke something in Marcus. Before he knew it, he was recounting the entire experience to her. Hawthorne's thinly veiled racism, dismissive attitude, the humiliation of being offered a token position. "Oh, Marcus," Evelyn breathed, her voice a mixture of sympathy and anger. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that, but I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." Her words were a balm to his wounded spirit. "Thanks, Ev. I thought we were past this, you know? In 2024, at a company like Pinnacle, I guess I was naive." "You weren't naive, Marcus. You were hopeful. And there's nothing wrong with that," Evelyn reassured him. "So, what's your next move?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, his gaze falling on a framed photo of his parents. His father's words echoed in his mind once again. "I'm not sure yet," he admitted. "But I know I'm not going to let this define me. There has to be a way to turn this around." As if on cue, his computer chimed with a new email notification. Marcus glanced at the screen, his eyes widening as he read the sender's name, Ev, I've got to go. There's an email I need to read. I'll call you back, okay? After hanging up, Marcus opened the email, his heart racing. The message was from Ava Chen, a former colleague who now sat on the board of directors at TechVance, one of Pinnacle's main competitors. Marcus, I hope this email finds you well. I heard through the grapevine about what happened at Pinnacle. Their loss is potentially our gain. I have a proposition for you. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? Ava. Marcus read the email twice, hardly daring to believe it. Quickly typed out a response, agreeing to meet Ava the next day at a quiet cafe they both favor. That night, sleep eluded Marcus. His mind raced with possibilities. What did Ava want to discuss? Could this be the opportunity he'd been waiting for? As the first light of dawn crept through his window, Marcus rose, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The cafe was bustling when Marcus arrived the next morning. He spotted Ava immediately. Crisp suit and composed demeanor, a stark contrast to the casual vibe of the place. As he approached, she stood to greet him with a warm smile. "Marcus, it's good to see you," Ava said, gesturing for him to take a seat. "I'm sorry about what happened at Pinnacle. Richard Hawthorne's reputation precedes him, unfortunately." Marcus nodded, grateful for her understanding. "Thank you, Ava. I appreciate you reaching out. Your email mentioned a proposition?" Ava leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Yes. Marcus, what would you say if I told you that TechVance is looking for a new CEO?" The words hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. He blinked, certain he had misheard. "I'm sorry, did you say CEO?" Ava nodded, her smile widening. "Exactly. Our current CEO, James Morton, is retiring at the end of the month. The board has been quietly searching for a replacement, someone with fresh ideas who can lead TechVance into the future. When I heard about what happened at Pinnacle, I knew you were exactly what we've been looking for." Marcus sat back, his mind reeling. "Ava, I'm flattered, but CEO? That's a huge leap from the COO position I was interviewing for at Pinnacle." "Is it though?" Ava challenged. "Marcus, I've known you for years. I've seen your work, your leadership style, your vision. You've been ready for this for a long time. The only reason you haven't made it to this level yet is because of people like Richard Hawthorne." Her words struck a chord in Marcus. He thought about all the times he'd been passed over for promotions, all the subtle ways he'd been held back despite his qualifications and achievements. "The board is impressed with your track record," Ava continued. "We believe you have the skills and the vision to take TechVance to new heights. Plus, your experience with both startups and established corporations gives you a unique perspective that we need." Marcus's mind was racing. This was more than just a job offer. It was a chance to prove everyone who had ever doubted him wrong. It was an opportunity to show Richard Hawthorne and others like him that talent, hard work, and integrity could triumph over prejudice. "What's the timeline for this decision?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the excitement building within him. "The board wants to move quickly," Ava replied. "We'd like to have you meet with them next week. If all goes well, we could announce your appointment by the end of the month." Marcus nodded slowly, processing the information. "And you're sure the board is on board with this? They understand who I am, where I come from?" Ava's expression softened. "Marcus, the board doesn't just understand. They're excited about it. TechVance has been pushing for greater diversity in tech for years. Having a CEO who not only talks the talk but has lived the experience? That's invaluable." For the first time since the disastrous interview at Pinnacle, Marcus felt a genuine smile spread across his face. "Ava, I don't know what to say. This is incredible." "Say you'll meet with the board," Ava urged. "Give them a chance to see what I see in you." Marcus extended his hand, grasping Ava's firmly. "I'd be honored to meet with them." As they parted ways outside the cafe, Marcus felt a surge of energy he hadn't experienced in years. He pulled out his phone, dialing Evelyn's number. "Ev," he said as soon as she answered, "you're not going to believe what just happened." While he recounted his meeting with Ava, Marcus couldn't help but marvel at how quickly things had turned around. Just days ago, he had left Pinnacle Industries feeling defeated and humiliated. Now, he was on the verge of an opportunity beyond his wildest dream. As he walked home, his steps light and purposeful, Marcus thought about the journey ahead. The board meeting, potential challenges of taking on a CEO role, responsibility of leading a company like TechVance. It was daunting, but exhilarating. But more than anything, he thought about the message his appointment would send to young people of color in the tech industry who had faced similar barriers. To his daughter Amelia, showing her that perseverance and integrity could overcome prejudice. And yes, even to Richard Hawthorne and Pinnacle Industries, proving just how short-sighted and costly their discrimination had been. Marcus Wells was ready to step into the spotlight, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was prepared to face it head-on. After all, he had been preparing for this moment his entire career. Little did he know, the twists and turns his journey would take were far from over. The coming weeks would test his resolve, challenge his principles, and ultimately redefine not just his career, but the entire landscape of the tech industry. The week leading up to Marcus's meeting with TechVance's board of directors was a whirlwind of preparation. He spent countless hours researching the company's history, analyzing its financial reports, and formulating a vision for its future. Evelyn and Amelia rallied around him, offering support and acting as sounding boards for his ideas. On the morning of the meeting, Marcus stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie. The face that looked back at him was etched with determination. He thought of his father, wishing he could see him now. "This is for you, Dad," he whispered. The TechVance headquarters was a sleek, modern building that seemed to touch the sky. As Marcus walked through the lobby, he couldn't help but compare it to Pinnacle Industries. Where Pinnacle had felt cold and imposing, TechVance radiated energy and innovation. Ava met him at the elevator, her smile reassuring. "Ready to knock their socks off?" she asked. Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The boardroom was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Around a large oval table sat the members of TechVance's board, a diverse group of individuals who regarded Marcus with curious and expectant expression. "Mr. Wells," began Sandra Torres, the board's chairperson, "we've heard a lot about you from Ava. We're excited to hear your vision for TechVance." For the next 2 hours, Marcus presented his ideas, answered questions, and engaged in thoughtful discussion with the board members. He spoke passionately about increasing diversity in tech, expanding into emerging markets, and fostering a culture of innovation and inclusivity. As the meeting drew to a close, Sandra leaned forward, a glimmer in her eye. "Mr. Wells, I speak for the entire board when I say we're impressed. Your vision aligns perfectly with where we see TechVance heading. We'd like to offer you the position of CEO, effective immediately." Marcus felt a surge of emotion, joy, pride, and a touch of disbelief. "I'm honored," he said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "I accept." The room erupted in applause. As Marcus shook hands with each board member, he caught Ava's eye. She gave him a subtle thumbs up, her face beaming with pride. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Press releases were drafted, transition plans were put into motion, and Marcus found himself thrust into the spotlight as news of his appointment spread through the tech world. It was during this whirlwind that Marcus received an unexpected call. The caller ID displayed a number he didn't recognize. "Hello, this is Marcus Wells," he answered, curious. "Mr. Wells," came a familiar voice that made Marcus's blood run cold. "This is Richard Hawthorne from Pinnacle Industries." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. "Mr. Hawthorne, what can I do for you?" "I've just heard the news about your appointment at TechVance," Hawthorne said, his tone unreadable. "I must say I was surprised." Marcus took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Were you Mr. Hawthorne? I recall you questioning my qualifications quite thoroughly during our last encounter." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Hawthorne spoke again, his voice had lost some of its usual bravado. "Yes, well, it seems I may have been hasty in my judgment. I'm calling to congratulate you." The words hung in the air, laden with unspoken tension. Marcus could almost picture Hawthorne's face, a struggle between pride and the realization of his massive error. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne," Marcus replied, his voice even. "I appreciate the call. I was also wondering," Hawthorne continued, a note of hesitation in his voice, "if you might be open to discussing potential collaborations between Pinnacle and TechVance in the future." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. how quickly the tables had turned. "I'm always open to discussions that could benefit both our companies, Mr. Hawthorne. Have your people call my office to set something up." After exchanging a few more pleasantries, Marcus ended the call. He sat back in his chair, processing what had just happened. The man who had humiliated him just weeks ago was now seeking his favor. It was a vindication of sorts, but Marcus felt no joy in it, only a renewed sense of purpose. As he prepared for his first day as CEO of TechVance, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his journey was far from over. The tech world was watching, waiting to see what this unexpected new leader would do. Pressure was immense. So was the opportunity. Marcus's first few months at the helm of TechVance were a baptism by fire. He implemented new diversity initiatives, pushed for more ethical AI development, and steered the company towards sustainable practice. His leadership style, marked by transparency and inclusivity, began to transform the company culture. But not everyone was thrilled with the changes. A vocal minority of employees and shareholders resisted, clinging to the old ways of doing things. Whispers of discontent began to circulate, and Marcus found himself facing opposition from unexpected quarters. It all came to a head during a crucial board meeting 6 months into Marcus's tenure. He had just finished presenting a bold new strategy for expansion into renewable energy tech, when board member Thomas Blackwood cleared his throat. "While I appreciate your enthusiasm, Mr. Wells," Blackwood began, his tone condescending, "I'm concerned that you're pushing for too much change, too quickly. Some of us feel that you might be letting your personal background influence company decisions unduly." The room fell silent. Marcus felt all eyes on him, waiting to see how he would respond to this thinly veiled attack. It was a moment that would define his leadership, and potentially the future of TechVance. Taking a deep breath, Marcus stood, his gaze sweeping across the room before settling on Blackwood. "Mr. Blackwood, I appreciate your concern," he began, his voice calm, firm. "But let me be clear. My personal background, as you put it, is precisely why I was chosen for this position." He paused, letting his words sink in. "My experiences have given me a unique perspective on the challenges and opportunities facing not just our company, but our entire industry. Changes I'm proposing aren't just about diversity or social responsibility, though those are crucial. They're about positioning TechVance at the forefront of innovation, tapping into markets and talent pools our competitors are overlooking, and creating sustainable growth for years to come." Marcus could see the other board members listening intently, some nodding in agreement. He pressed on, his voice gaining strength. "Change is never easy, but it's necessary for growth. The tech world is evolving, and companies that cling to outdated ways of thinking will be left behind. I was brought in to lead TechVance into the future, and that's exactly what I intend to do." As Marcus concluded his impromptu speech, the room erupted in applause. Even Blackwood seemed taken aback by the force of Marcus's conviction. Sandra Torres, who had been watching the exchange closely, stood up. "I think Mr. Wells has made his position clear," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "And speaking for myself, I believe he's absolutely right. All in favor of moving forward with the proposed strategy." One by one, hands went up around the table. Even Blackwood, after a moment's hesitation, raised his hand. As the meeting adjourned, Marcus felt a mix of relief and renewed determination. He had faced down the challenge and emerged stronger for it. But he knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with more obstacles, more doubters, more moments that would test his resolve. But as he looked out over the city skyline from his office, Marcus Wells felt ready for whatever came next. He had fought his way to this position, overcoming prejudice and narrow-mindedness. Now, he had the chance to create real change, not just for TechVance, but for the entire industry. With a smile, Marcus turned back to his desk. There was work to be done, future to shape, and he was just getting started. As the seasons changed and Marcus's first year as CEO of TechVance drew to a close, tech industry landscape had begun to shift. Under his leadership, TechVance had not only weathered the storms of change, but had emerged as a beacon of innovation and progress. The company's new initiatives in renewable energy tech were paying off, with several breakthrough patents filed, and partnerships formed with leading environmental organizations. The diversity programs Marcus had implemented were attracting top talent from around the world, infusing TechVance with fresh ideas and perspective. But perhaps most significantly, Marcus had spearheaded a revolutionary approach to ethical AI development. TechVance's new AI framework, which prioritized transparency, fairness, and privacy, was quickly becoming the gold standard in the industry. As Marcus prepared for TechVance's annual stakeholder meeting, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. The memory of that humiliating interview with Richard Hawthorne seemed like a lifetime ago. The day of the stakeholder meeting dawned bright and clear. Marcus stood at the podium, facing a sea of faces: employees, shareholders, media, and industry leaders. Among them, he spotted a familiar face: Richard Hawthorne himself, sitting in the back row with an unreadable expression. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice strong and clear. "A year ago, I stood before you as a newcomer, promising to lead TechVance into a new era. Today, I'm proud to say that we've not only met that promise, we've exceeded it." He went on to detail the company's achievements over the past year: the record profits, the groundbreaking innovations, positive press. But then, his tone grew more serious. "But our work is far from over," he continued. "As we look to the future, we face challenges that go beyond profit margins and market share. We stand at a crossroads in the tech industry, a moment that will define not just our businesses, but the very fabric of our society." Marcus paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. For too long, our industry has been plagued by a lack of diversity, by ethical blind spots, by a failure to consider the long-term impacts of our innovations. Today, I'm announcing a new initiative that will address these issues head-on. A murmur ran through the crowd as Marcus unveiled his plan. A comprehensive program called Tech for All would combine aggressive diversity targets, ethical AI development, environmental sustainability, and community reach. "This isn't just about TechVance," Marcus explained, his voice passionate. "We're opening this program to all tech companies willing to commit to these principles. It's time for us to come together and create an industry that truly serves all of humanity." As he concluded his speech, the room erupted in applause. Even those who had been skeptical of Marcus's leadership a year ago were on their feet, energized by his vision. In the days that followed, the Tech for All initiative dominated headlines. Industry leaders debated its merits, tech blogs dissected its implications, and social media buzzed with discussion. But the real test came a week later, when Marcus received a call from an unexpected source. "Mr. Wells," came the voice of Richard Hawthorne. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Mr. Hawthorne," Marcus replied, keeping his tone neutral. "What can I do for you?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Hawthorne spoke again, his voice had lost its usual bravado. "I'll cut to the chase, Mr. Wells. I've been following your Tech for All initiative closely. I must admit, I was skeptical at first. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've come to realize, you're right." Marcus raised an eyebrow, caught off guard by this admission. "I appreciate that, Mr. Hawthorne." "Truth is," Hawthorne continued, "Pinnacle has been falling behind. We've been so focused on short-term gains that we've lost sight of the bigger picture. Your initiative, it's the wake-up call our industry needed." Marcus listened intently, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "I'm calling to ask if Pinnacle Industries could join your Tech for All program," Hawthorne said, a note of humility in his voice that Marcus had never heard before. "And I owe you an apology, Mr. Wells. My behavior during our interview last year was inexcusable. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment, and it cost Pinnacle dearly. You've proven me wrong in every possible way, and I'm man enough to admit it." For a moment, Marcus was speechless. He thought back to that humiliating interview, to the anger and disappointment he had felt. But now, hearing the sincerity in Hawthorne's voice, he felt something unexpected. "Hope." "Mr. Hawthorne," Marcus finally replied, "I appreciate your apology, and I would be more than happy to have Pinnacle join our initiative. This isn't about individual companies or personal grudges. It's about creating a better future for everyone in tech and beyond." As they worked out the details, Marcus felt a sense of things coming full circle. What had started as a personal setback had led to a revolution in the tech industry, one that was bringing together former rivals in the name of progress. In the weeks that followed, company after company signed on to the Tech for All initiative. Marcus found himself at the center of a movement that was reshaping the tech landscape. He was invited to speak at conferences, consulted by policymakers, and hailed as a visionary leader. But for Marcus, the most rewarding moment came during a visit to a local high school. As he spoke to a group of students about careers in tech, he saw faces filled with hope and excitement. Faces of all colors, genders, and backgrounds. These were the future leaders of the industry, and thanks to the changes Marcus had set in motion, they would have opportunities could only have dreamed of at their age. As he left the school that day, Marcus thought back to his father's words. "Son, no matter what life throws at you, always hold your head high and let your work speak for itself." He smiled, knowing that he had done just that, and in doing so had changed not just his own life, but the lives of countless others. The journey wasn't over, of course. There would be new challenges to face, new barriers to break down. But as Marcus looked to the future, he felt ready for whatever came next. He had turned humiliation into triumph, and in doing so, had sparked a revolution that would shape the tech industry for generations to come. 5 years had passed since Marcus Wells had become the CEO of TechVance and launched the Tech for All initiative. The tech landscape had undergone a dramatic transformation, and Marcus found himself at the forefront of a new era in the industry. On a crisp autumn morning, Marcus stood at the podium of a grand auditorium, addressing the attendees of the first annual Future of Tech Summit. The event, organized by TechVance, had brought together leaders from across the industry, government officials, educators, and students. When we started this journey 5 years ago, Marcus began, his voice carrying across the packed room. Many said it couldn't be done. They said our goals were too ambitious, our vision too idealistic. Look at where we are today. He gestured to the diverse crowd before him, a living testament to the changes that had swept through the tech world. Our industry is more diverse, more inclusive, and more innovative than ever before. We've made strides in ethical AI that were once thought impossible. Our environmental initiatives have set new standards for corporate responsibility. As Marcus spoke, couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. The humiliating interview with Richard Hawthorne seemed like a lifetime ago, yet it had been the catalyst for everything that followed. But our work is far from over, Marcus continued, his tone growing more serious. As we look to the future, we face new challenges. The rapid pace of technological advancement brings with it ethical dilemmas we're only beginning to grapple with. The digital divide threatens to leave behind those who need technology's benefits the most. And the environmental impact of our industry continues to be a pressing concern. He paused, letting his words sink in. That's why today, I'm announcing the next phase of our Tech for All initiative. We're launching a global fund to bring technology education to underserved communities worldwide. We're creating an international ethics board to guide the development of AI and other emerging technologies, and we're doubling our investment in green tech research and development. The audience erupted in applause, but Marcus wasn't finished. Perhaps most importantly, we're expanding our mentorship program. Because the future of tech isn't just about the gadgets we create or the code we write. It's about the people we inspire, doors we open, and the lives we change. As Marcus concluded his speech, he noticed a familiar face in the crowd. Richard Hawthorne, now retired from Pinnacle Industries, gave him a nod of respect. The two men had developed an unlikely friendship over the years, with Hawthorne becoming one of the strongest advocates for diversity in tech. After the summit, Marcus found himself in his office, looking out over the city skyline. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. The door opened to reveal Amelia, his daughter, now a promising young software engineer at TechVance. "Hey, Dad," she said with a smile. "Great speech today." Marcus beamed with pride. Watching Amelia flourish in the tech world, free from many of the barriers he had faced, was one of his greatest joys. "Thanks, sweetheart. How are things going with your team?" "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about," Amelia said, her eyes shining with excitement. We've had a breakthrough with the neural interface project. I think it could be a game changer for assistive technology." As Amelia explained her team's work, Marcus felt a surge of emotion. This was what it was all about, creating a world where talent could thrive, regardless of background or circumstance. Later that evening, as Marcus prepared to leave the office, he received an unexpected video call. To his surprise, it was from the President of the United States. "Mr. Wells," the President greeted him warmly. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Not at all, Madam President," Marcus replied, curious about the reason for the call. "I'll get straight to the point," he said. "I've been following your work closely, and I'm impressed. I'm putting together a task force to address the future of technology in our country, and I want you to lead it. We need your vision, your experience, and your commitment to ethical tech. What do you say?" Marcus was momentarily speechless. This was an opportunity to effect change on an even larger scale, to shape policy that could impact millions of lives. "I'd be honored, Madam President," he finally managed to say. As he ended the call, Marcus sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what lay ahead. He thought back to that day in Richard Hawthorne's office, when he had walked out with his head held high despite the humiliation. He thought of his father's words, of the struggles and triumphs that had brought him to this moment. Marcus Wells had not only become a CEO, he had become a beacon of change, a symbol of what was possible when talent and opportunity met. And now, he had the chance to shape the future of technology on a national level. As he gathered his things to head home, Marcus paused by the photo of his parents on his desk. "We did it, Dad," he whispered, a tear in his eye. "We really did it." Stepping out into the cool evening air, Marcus felt a sense of anticipation for what was to come. The journey had been long and often difficult, but it led him here, to a place where he could make a difference, not just for himself, but for generations to come. As he walked towards his car, Marcus couldn't help but smile. The humiliation of that interview had been just the beginning. What had followed was a story of triumph, transformation, and of the power of perseverance. And the best part? The story was far from over.